The best of the Morning X. 99X.
Personally, I've always been fascinated by life inside the White House, if not the politics itself, just the day-to-day operations of the White House, the mechanics of how it operates, and somebody who certainly could tell us a lot about that, more than we'll ever know, is a woman who has covered the White House as a reporter longer than any other reporter has ever covered the White House.
Since 1943, a reporter for UPI.
Helen Thomas, who always sitting right there in the front row. How long? Now, that seat is reserved for you in the front row of the press conferences. Is that right, Helen?
It's reserved for United Press International.
Okay.
Which is for all, you.
Whoever, any of our reporters could sit there.
I see. Okay. Now, it seems like you have a special place in a lot of whenever we've seen you interact with presidents, on the surface it seems like they all really seem to have liked you a lot, but have there been presidents that you felt really did not like you very much? All of them didn't like you?
Of course. Why should they like me? I'm in the press.
Well, but
presidents don't like the press.
But they had to have respected you, though.
Well, I hope so. I mean, that's all I ask, and I'd like to respect them too.
But isn't there, they may not like the job you do, but you don't think that maybe as a person you didn't have a personal relationship or were closer to one than the other on a personal basis? Not
really. I mean, you really have a detachment. You are the press, you are the enemy, you are the beast, you are the this and that. It's a real love-hate relationship. The love is simply because they need you.
And
I don't say that in anger. I just say that because of the adversarial role, and when candidates on the campaign trail love the press, they want as much publicity as possible if it's favorable and good. But once they get into the White House, suddenly the press is an intrusion. We are the aliens who just landed and so forth.
There were 3 vice presidents. I counted 3. Maybe there were more that later became presidents while you covered the White House.
Right.
Vice President Nixon, LBJ, and Bush. Did any of them?
Truman. Yeah.
Oh, was he while you were?
Not when I was in the White House. Right.
While you were in the White House.
Right. Okay.
Did any of those 3 noticeably become very different types of people when they became president?
Once they got the power?
Yeah, once they became president from when they were vice president?
Well, you don't know them as well when they suddenly crop up as great candidates and win the nominations in the presidency. But I think that the White House does overcome them all, and suddenly they think they're president. It's very difficult. Mm-hmm. There is a certain arrogance of power and a sense of imperialism that they can do anything. They'll do things to make end runs around the law, unfortunately, and their sense of power knows no bounds.
Which guy out of all how many 8 presidents have been through there? Which one out of all 8 exuded the most power? Which one seemed like he was more powerful than any of the others?
And the less approachable?
Well, LBJ exuded and had the most
arrogance.
Power in the sense because he had come right out of the Senate where he was Senate Majority Leader. He knew where all the bodies were buried. He knew how to twist arms. And first 2 years in office, he moved the mountain in terms of the Great Society, landmark bills, civil rights, voting rights for blacks for the first time in the South, Medicare, federal aid to education, starting with Head Start and so forth. And the other question was the least accessible?
Yeah.
Well, I think that all presidents are not accessible when they're in trouble.
Right.
When they're in trouble, they go into hiding or put the wagons in the circle and so forth. But none of them were as accessible as LBJ when we walked around the South Lawn with him, or with Jimmy Carter, for that matter. We could walk down Main Street in Plains, Georgia, on a Saturday morning when he had come home for the weekend or longer. So most of them become more and more remote, and there's a lot more security today than there was yesterday. So there are lines drawn. We're always behind ropes and chains.
It's interesting you mentioned Jimmy Carter because I've read books that have said that while on the exterior to the American public he always seemed like a very sweet, warm, caring, gentle man, that on the inside he was very aloof, very hard to get close to. He was a micromanager, and that the inside the White House, Jimmy Carter was much different than what the public perceived.
Well, who wrote that?
I believe that was the book that was written by Kessler, the FBI agent who used to...
Howard Kessler?
Was it
Behind the scenes.
Was it Howard or
Ron?
Ron? The guy who wrote the...
yes.
was Inside the White House was the name of the book.
Well, I think that... I don't think that Carter was deceptive. I think he was really a private man. In many ways, his calling really was to be a minister, because I think he did some wonderful things, especially in foreign policy. I think that he seemed to be remote, certainly to the Democratic leadership, because all these people come in campaigning against Washington, and so, that gets them off on the wrong foot. But they really have to know Congress, and they have to know how to operate here. So I think that it's true that there did seem to be some distance there.
Mm-hmm.
We're speaking with Helen Thomas. The new book that she has out is called Front Row at the White House. Helen, speaking of, you were talking about presidents that were in trouble and became less accessible. Mm-hmm. During the Watergate scandal, what types of questions were you able to ask Nixon at the time during press conferences?
Well, we went after him both barrels. Actually, he went for 5 months without a news conference, and couldn't blame him. I mean, every day when he picked up a newspaper, I'm sure he wanted to go back to bed.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because it was as inexorable as a Greek tragedy. Nothing he could do could change the inevitable end. And so it was very, very difficult when we would ask about the tapes and so forth. He was, I must say that he was brave enough to come out every once in a while, but I'm sure that he really felt under the gun, as did President Clinton in the Monica Lewinsky horror.
Are you surprised that he weathered that storm, that President Clinton weathered that storm?
No.
Because, I remember when it first broke, and there was the when it was first became made public, the whole Monica Lewinsky thing, and I'll never forget seeing Sam Donaldson on This Week saying, "I'd be surprised if this presidency lasts another 2 weeks."
And he and his name is Legion. Really, made the same kind of. They shot from the hip, and I don't know if he regrets that, but he certainly has been teased about it a lot.
Has he?
Yeah, I mean, I think jumping to conclusions about the American people or how government works, you're really off base.
Helen, did you ever ask a question from the front row there that once you said it, you just regretted that it ever came out of your mouth?
No, I can't say that.
No?
I mean, I would say that a lot of times when you Monday morning quarterback yourself, you always say, well, why didn't I put it this way, or why didn't I ask another question which would have been more pertinent? But the question per se, no, I don't think so.
Was there one question, though, that one of the presidents, just felt was completely appalling?
They probably did, but who cares?
Well,
I mean, they're supposed to answer questions.
I know, but
what do you think of,
Let me tell you one thing, that the press conference is the only forum, the only institution in our society where a president can be questioned. I mean,
Right.
Congress can subpoena him.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to do that every 5 minutes. And we should know these answers, and they should never feel so powerful that they can't be questioned.
Well, do you think that there are appropriate times and places for specific types of questions? And what I'm getting at is, a lot of times, especially like during the Lewinsky thing, there were times when maybe the president was meeting with some foreign dignitary, and maybe when he was involved in some kind of ceremony that was completely unrelated to domestic affairs, and he was on foreign soil, and here the whole world is watching, and somebody would stand up and ask him a question about having oral sex in the Oval Office. And it almost seemed like I was kind of embarrassed as an American to have that brought out on an international stage like that in times like that.
Well, we were set up. I mean, they deliberately did that, and they admitted afterwards, even President Clinton admitted that he put us in an untenable position where those were the questions of the day. It wasn't a question of sex. It was a question of the President of the United States, who was on the brink of being forced out of office and being impeached. It was no longer Monica Lewinsky. It was this man's fate. And they deliberately always had these news conferences. He didn't have a solo news conference for 9 months. And as I say, they'd say, when we asked for a solo, they said, no, and they would always do it when there'd be a visiting foreign head of state even the news conference in Moscow. The question's there. It has to be asked. It doesn't matter where it is.
Really? Now, were you in the? Well, I know you were because I saw you were in the press press room when the president gave his famous finger wagging. I did not have sex with that woman.
Yes, that was in the Roosevelt room. Mm-hmm.
Now, when and I remember watching that, thinking, you know what? I believe him. Did you believe him?
Yes, I always believed presidents until proved otherwise.
Yeah, why wouldn't you?
I'm very naive.
Well, a lot of people think that I was naive for believing that.
I believed him. I thought, this man is standing in front of us.
I would be that dumb enough
to lie.
Yeah, really.
No, so publicly.
You've never believed a president was lying to you?
I always like to take them at face value and put them in quotes.
Helen, one last question. Do you, in the years that you've covered the White House, do you have any one moment that stands out as being a very personal moment that you could share with us that happened between you and a president that maybe was something not at a press conference, not an official function? Did you...
Well, can it be during the president-elect days of Kennedy? And
yes.
I thought it was very poignant when we all rushed to Georgetown Hospital when John F. Kennedy Jr. was born. Mm-hmm. And then for 10 days, those were the days when they kept a woman in the hospital for 10 days after a cesarean.
Right.
So Jackie was there for 10 days, and President-elect John F. Kennedy would come to the hospital every day, twice a day, in fact. And we were assigned to, wire service people were assigned to the hospital and to clock him in and out. And every time I saw him, I would throw a question at him, buttonhole him. And once I remember asking Kennedy if he wanted his son to grow up to be president, and he said, I just want him to be healthy.
That's nice. That was just between you and JFK?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was a very, very poignant moment, I thought.
Now, ever receive any nice gifts from a president?
Oh, yes. We got, at Christmas time, we got charm bracelets from LBJ.
Well, if they're from LBJ, they may have bugs in them. It may have been bugged.
No. Very generous, very kind. No, we've gotten little gifts, mementos. There's kind of souvenirs with the White House.
Is there one you hold above any other?
Not really. I give them. I do like the pens that we used to get in the older days, like Johnson and Nixon eras and so forth. When some important bill would be signed, then a lot of extra pens would be handed out, and I loved getting one and handing them down to my nieces and nephews who could take it to school, show and tell.
Yeah, that's a nice piece.
Something tells me that somewhere in Helen Thomas's house there is a drawer with a whole bunch of Air Force One souvenirs.
There are lots of Air Force One souvenirs which I have distributed to my family because I want them to have some sense of historic legacy.
Yeah, that's kind of cool to have that kind of stuff.
Thank you, Helen, for your time.
Thomas.
Thank you.
Helen
Bye-bye.
Thomas.
Wake up, wake up, wake up, Morning X, Morning X. Wake up, wake up, wake up, Morning X. Morning X is in wake up, wake up, wake up, Morning X. Morning X, we got Barnes, Leslie, and Jimmy live on the Morning X.
The best of the Morning X. 99X.